Fox News alert: 2 U.S. soldiers are killed and 2 more wounded after an Afghan soldier goes on a shooting rampage. Officials say the Afghan soldier opened fire on the U.S. service members in eastern Afghanistan in the Akin district of Nangarhar. Hello and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News Headquarters. I'm Kelly Wright.
And I'm Julie Banderas. Good afternoon to you. The Taliban now taking responsibility for the attack, boasting one of their own had infiltrated the Afghan army. John Huddy is live from our Mideast Bureau with the very latest. Hi, John.
Yeah, and Julie, this is being called a quote-unquote insider attack. As you mentioned, an Afghan soldier, the Taliban claiming responsibility. This Afghan soldier, again, an insurgent and operative for the Taliban, opening fire on U.S. troops inside this base. Now, take a look again at the map we just showed you. It happened in the Nangarhar province in eastern Afghanistan. That's east of Kabul. It's very close to the Pakistan border, and that's where officials say this Afghan soldier opened fire, basically started spraying the U.S. soldiers with machine gun fire, killing 2, wounding 2 others before that Afghan soldier was killed by return fire. Now, this isn't the first time there's been a so-called green on blue attack. The Taliban, again, claiming responsibility. We'll have much more on this later. Guys, back
All
to
right,
you.
John, thank you so much. John Huddy reporting from Israel. Right now, we go to a live event where former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt, is now speaking at the commissioning of the USS Gabrielle Giffords. Let's listen in.
The USS Gabrielle Giffords is strong and tough, just like her crew. I thought of you in my darkest days. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of the United States of America. We ask so much of you. Despite danger, you say yes. You make me proud, you make America proud. I will never forget this day or the crew of the USS Gabrielle Giffords. Fair winds and following seas. Thank you very much.
All right, so quite a crowd there in response to former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Just to give you a little bit of background, this is a USS Littoral ship by the USS Navy. It's being dedicated in her honor, named as the USS Gabrielle Giffords. On January 8th, 2011, we were all shocked. The entire world was shocked when Gabrielle Giffords was actually... let's listen in right now before I go into the background of Gabby Giffords. Let's listen.
Especially for being partners with us on this as the sponsor of the USS Gabrielle Giffords. We're so excited for all the years ahead where Gabby and I are going to support the crew and the officers of this amazing Navy ship. And what a great day it is here in the state of Texas and in Galveston County, where I lived for 15 years. I'm so happy to be here. It's really close to NASA, where I worked. I got some NASA colleagues here, some Navy buddies, Merchant Marine Academy, Gabby's former members that she served with in Congress, her colleagues in the state Senate and the State House, and I think even some El Campo tire people are here. So good morning, everybody. You know, I've got to say that I hope the rest of these LCS ships have an easier time following the USS Gabrielle Giffords that I'm going to have following my amazing wife in giving a speech. This is hard for me. And thank you to the U.S. Navy for this fabulous commissioning ceremony, and thank you to Austal USA for building such a great and worthy ship. Thank you very much. You know, this morning we've heard how appropriate it is to name a U.S. Navy warship after a woman possessing the courage and grit of my wife, former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. The characteristics that she exemplifies like strength, toughness, and resilience are, after all, the same attributes that you'd seek in a warship. Like Gabby, this ship will face down some lethal threats, but it will persevere through that adversity, and it will leave our lesser adversaries in her great giant wake out of the back of this ship. However, those of you who know Gabby best know this. What connects her most to the USS Gabrielle Giffords is not 418 feet of gray metal. It is not her top speed of nearly 50 knots, maybe more than that, but we can't admit it. It's not her shallow draft. It's not her fierce and stealthy construction, nor the 4 engines that let this ship turn on a dime. It's not even Gabby's name that's emblazoned on the back of the hull. It's simply this. It's the crew. The crew, the men and women, and their shared commitment to a value more American than any other. And you know what that is? That is service. It is their service, the men and women behind the stage. It's their service that keep us strong, and it's their service that lets us all sleep safely at night. It was service that led Gabby to Congress. It was service that led her to seek a role on the Armed Services Committee, where she spent countless hours working on behalf of the men and women of our military. Service guided her as a proud Navy spouse. I think the only Navy spouse in Congress at the time. And it was service as a Navy spouse where she supported me from the moment she married me into the day I left the Navy. This value of service connected her to the people of Arizona and to the citizens of our great nation. It's what lies at the heart of our marriage and our commitment to each other. Today, it is what grounds our appreciation for the men and women of the USS Gabrielle Giffords. So to the crew, on behalf of everybody assembled here today, thank you for your service, and know that as long as Gabby and I live, we will be here to support and serve you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Congresswoman Giffords and Captain Kelly.
And there we have it, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, as well as her husband, Captain Mark Kelly. Captain Mark Kelly giving his wife a very fitting tribute, thanking her for her service to this country, also thanking her for her service to his marriage as a spouse of a Navy captain. And, of course, we thank her as well for her service to this country. You recall that it was in January of 2011 that Gabby, who was serving her 3rd term, was a victim of an assassination attempt near Tucson at a Safeway supermarket, where she was publicly greeting people and was shot in that. She survived those injuries. But ultimately, because of those injuries, had to resign from her office as a United States Congresswoman. And today, they're dedicating the U.S. Navy, dedicating a U.S. Navy vessel in her honor, Gabby Giffords. It's now called the USS Gabrielle Giffords. We thank them both for their service to this country. Back now to what's also going on today. President Trump spending this weekend in Bedminster, New Jersey, days after former FBI Director James Comey's damaging testimony on Capitol Hill. The president accuses Comey of lying to Congress about their private conversations. Kristen Fisher joins us live now in Branchburg, New Jersey, with all the very latest. Kristen?
Hey, Kelly. Well, first, a quick update on something happening today. President Trump has been briefed by his National Security Council about what's been going on in Afghanistan. 2 U.S. soldiers killed by an Afghan army soldier. So the president has been briefed on that, and the vice president is actually speaking momentarily in Wisconsin, and he may address this as well, so something to watch out for. And the other big news kind of on the president's horizon this weekend are two big trips that were just announced. On Friday, he's going to be heading to Miami, and then he's also going to be going to Poland in July ahead of the G20 summit. More on that in a moment, but first, all of Washington, all of President Trump's legal team is still fixated on what was said during that Rose Garden ceremony just yesterday. The big outstanding question is, of course, are there tapes, are there recordings of President Trump's private conversations with his then FBI director, James Comey? Here's what he said yesterday.
Well, I'll tell you about that maybe sometime in the very near future.
You seem to be hinting that there are recordings of those conversations.
I'm not hinting anything. I'll tell you about it over a very short period of time. Okay? Okay. Do you have a question here?
When will you tell us about the recording?
Over a fairly short period of time.
Are there tapes, sir?
Oh, you're going to be very disappointed when you hear the answer.
Now, at that press conference, President Trump also said that he was 100% willing to testify under oath to counter what Comey said on Thursday. So the White House clearly gearing up for a fight here, while the president's surrogates outside the White House are continuing to make very pointed attacks against Comey, calling him a liar and a leaker. Listen.
The question that these Republicans should be asking and demand of Jim Comey under oath is, how many times did you leak information? We know publicly now he said he didn't have the courage to leak it directly, so he leaked it to a law professor. But how many other times did he ever leak information when he was the director of the FBI?
So the other big news out of the White House this weekend is that President Trump will be traveling to Miami next Friday to unveil his administration's policies about Cuba. So the White House really continuing to push forward with some new policy initiatives despite everything that's been going on back in Washington. Kelly.
All right, Kristen Fisher reporting live from Branchburg, New Jersey. Thank you, Kristen.
All right, for more on this, Emily Goodwin joins us now. She is the managing editor of Real Clear Politics. Oh boy, what a week this has been. First of all, let's talk about the complaint, because here's what it's going to take issue with, and that is Comey's revelation that he asked a friend to pass along to a reporter notes that he actually took of his private conversations with the president. Any merit to that?
Well, it's going to be a question of executive privilege, which is what Trump's lawyers have indicated that they're going to be looking into. And that's a fair question. But the question is, did the president invoke executive privilege? And also, does it still apply? Because he's been talking about this. He's been tweeting about it. So it's a little bit of a gray area right now.
What do you make of President Trump's decision to bring in his personal attorney in the very first place?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And we know the president really values loyalty, and so maybe he wanted someone who's known him for years and has been through him with various lawsuits, and that he trusts and has a better, stronger relationship with.
You know, we got to talk about the Trump team asking for a hearing on the Comey leak. It could go to court, but then you look back at the history of lawsuits before the president became president, because Trump has threatened to sue in the past, and he has followed through, of course. But legal action taken by both the president and by his company, his businesses, had been involved as of 2016, I believe in October, in 3,500 different state and federal lawsuits, which was unprecedented, the most amount of lawsuits that any presidential candidate at the time had ever been involved in. So the question is, how far will Trump go with this, and will it actually reach the courts?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think this is where the existence of those tapes come into question, right? Because if there are tapes and they're released, it'll depend on what they say if we hear them. But if they aren't tapes, then it becomes a he said, and that makes a court case a little more likable.
I would think if I was the lawyer representing the president, his personal attorney, when he was sitting there, you know, addressing those questions from reporters, he would not answer that question. Is there a tape? Do you have a tape? Obviously, his lawyer told him not to say anything. You do not, you know, so of course the reporters were having a field day with the fact that he said, you'll know soon enough. They wouldn't let the question go. When are you going to release? When are you going to tell us if there's a tape? You'll find out soon, but I'm not going to tell you when. That's advice, obviously, he's getting from his lawyer, right?
Absolutely, and whether he answers in a short time or not will soon to be determined. But I think one thing that his White House has to think about is, Democrats are eyeing the 2018 elections, and they're hoping to take back the House. And I've had Democrats tell me if they win, they're going to subpoena the heck out of this White House.
Now, as far as we know, Trump didn't exert executive privilege. You just spoke about that.
Right.
Now, if Trump does actually bring legal action, how hard is it going to be for President Trump to claim executive privilege?
It could be really hard because you also have to keep in mind when James Comey released these memos, when he had them leaked, he was a former employee. He wasn't actually directly working for the president at the time, and believe it or not, that kind of changes things. And then there's also cases where executive privilege has been waived when there's a question of legality, and if the president did maybe indicate to James Comey that he should back off the Flynn investigation. So I think it's still a question mark.
So then how strong is this case? Because if, let's say there are no tapes, hypothetically speaking, does that weaken their case? Or does this, because it's a he said, obviously. So
Right.
there needs to be some kind of evidence. If there was no one else in that room and it was just James Comey repeating the information verbally to another person and it was never recorded, there's really no way possible to find out whether this conversation really took place or not. So how critical are these tapes then to this legal case?
They could be very critical because you also have to keep in mind these memos that James Comey wrote while FBI director. These FBI memos are considered to be allowed in court cases. So that's also something the Trump team has to think about.
And President Trump did hint at that tweet when he talked about, let's hope that there aren't any audio recordings. It seems that perhaps they do have that in their back pocket. James Comey should be a little frightened by that potential, if that is indeed what happened in that conversation. We will find out.
We'll find out.
As the world turns. All right.
Exactly.
The days of our lives. I don't know. It just reminds me of all the soap operas I used to watch growing up. Emily Goodwin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kelly.
And we are following breaking developments. Vice President Mike Pence in Milwaukee, Wisconsin today expected to address the deadly attack in Afghanistan on U.S. soldiers, at least 2 dead. As soon as Vice President Pence speaks, we will be breaking into that live. Right now you're watching Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker addressing the crowd. We'll have more in a moment.
Access to health care.
And we are watching the Vice President Mike Pence there, who is about to speak. He's meeting with Wisconsin Governor Walker, talking to Direct Supply CEO Bob Walker and employees of Direct Supply and local business owners there in Milwaukee. He also intends on addressing the 2 soldiers and 2 soldiers killed and 2 injured in Afghanistan. Let's listen.
Hello, Wisconsin. It is great to be back. Great to be back with you all and back with my friend, Governor Scott Walker. More on him in a moment. Before I begin, though, allow me to take a moment to acknowledge what I learned about on my way here to Wisconsin today, the loss of American service members that took place in Afghanistan. On my way here, I was informed that U.S. service members were killed and wounded in an attack in Afghanistan. The President and I have been briefed. The details of this attack will be forthcoming. But suffice it to say, when heroes fall, Americans grieve, and our thoughts and prayers are with the families of these American heroes. It is great to be back in the Badger State. Thank you all for the warm welcome. And I bring greetings today from my friend, the man that Wisconsin voted overwhelmingly to make the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. Now, the President asked me to be here today. Thank the good people of Wisconsin not only for that decisive victory, but also to assure you that the Badger State has a friend in the White House. You'll hear that firsthand when President Trump comes to Wisconsin on this coming Tuesday. And I know you're all looking forward to it. Folks, in President Donald Trump, you elected a fighter and a winner. And he will never stop fighting for the American people and his agenda to make America great again. I promise you that. But you all know about fighters, because that's also a pretty good description of the man who just gave me that very kind introduction. You know, I've met quite a few governors over the years. I've even had the privilege to be one myself in the state of Indiana. So let me just say, I mean it from my heart when I tell you, Governor Scott Walker is one of the best governors in the history of this state and in the history of this country. Would you all mind getting on your feet and giving a rousing round of applause to Governor Scott Walker for the leadership that he provides every day? Let me also thank two more distinguished Wisconsin public servants who are here today. I had the opportunity to serve with the first one in Washington, D.C. for all of my 12 years in the Congress. And I know full well that in Washington, D.C. there is no greater stalwart for conservative principles and values than Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for that. So well deserved. And also, I'm so honored to be joined by another principled leader who fights for Wisconsin and fights for conservative values every day, Congressman Glenn Grothman. Thank you so much for being with us today. You know, President Trump and I couldn't be more grateful for the support of both of these leaders in the Congress of the United States. Well, let me also thank our host today, Bob Hillis, and the whole team here at Direct Supply for welcoming us to this extraordinary campus and this extraordinary American success story. You know, it's been 30-plus years. You've built everything that matters, Bob. A good name, a strong and prosperous company that has made this community and made this state better for it. Direct Supply is a true American success story, and that round of applause is so well deserved. You know, I like to say that President Trump has a three-part agenda for this.
And there you have the Vice President, Mike Pence, now 3 weekends in a row, in fact, coming out and speaking to hear employees, but of course addressing the very important and breaking news and very sad news today. News, in fact, that the Vice President said he actually got received on his way to this event there in Milwaukee, that 2 U.S. soldiers were killed by 2 Afghan soldiers and 2 other soldiers injured. Our hearts, our prayers go out to their families as they receive the most heartbreaking news of their lives today. We'll, of course, continue to watch this and monitor the situation in Afghanistan right here on Fox.
All right, Julie, thank you for that. Fallout now from the UK election continues with 2 top aides for British Prime Minister Theresa May stepping down. May's Conservative Party taking a huge hit in the election on Thursday and losing its majority in Parliament. What does that mean? Well, the results casting a shadow of uncertainty on the Brexit process, for one, just days before the start of negotiations. Joining me now is Joe Twyman, Head of Political and Social Research for Europe at U.Gov. Thanks for joining us, Joe. What do you make of all of this? It's a shock to Theresa May. It's a shock to the majority party there in the Parliament. What happens now?
Well, no one's really sure what happens now, and that's the reason for the uncertainty. Theresa May called this election 7 weeks ago now in order to achieve a larger majority to strengthen her position when going into the Brexit negotiations that start in only 9 days' time. Unfortunately, things didn't work out for her. Her campaign was not particularly strong, and she faltered on a number of key issues.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to ask you, I'm sorry, don't want to interrupt you, but I want to make sure we get as much of this as we possibly can. Where do you think she went wrong during her campaign?
Well, we're still crunching the numbers on that, but what's clear from the early indications are that she never really was able to maintain momentum. She concentrated on this idea of strong and stable. That was her phrase, repeated again and again. And unfortunately, during the campaign, she then had to make a U-turn, change her mind on a specific policy, which is unheard of during a British general election campaign. And she never really convinced the public to the degree that was needed, and so strong and stable became weak and wobbly, as the papers in this country dubbed it. In contrast to that, Jeremy Corbyn, her opponent from the Labour Party, among his supporters presented himself as representing hope, representing change, and representing positivity. Theresa May never really had a positive message to put across.
Well, Joe, one thing I want to ask, though, is how does this impact Brexit? I asked you that earlier, and you were saying no one knows at this point. Is it really an uncertainty at this point?
Well, firstly, we're not really sure who will be the leader of the government and indeed the Conservative Party to take these Brexit negotiations forward. Theresa May is staying on for now, but her authority within her own party and also more widely within the whole country has really been compromised. And so precisely how she moves forward is unclear. Does she resign sooner rather than later or ahead of the party conference in the fall? And then if someone new takes over, how will Europe respond to that, given that they only have a very, very small margin of error when it comes to negotiating with their own party on the deal?
Before I let you go, I've got to go back to this. Throughout the campaign, no one had been talking about terror and the possibility of terror attacks, and yet we saw what happened in Manchester several weeks ago, and then most recently, of course, in London last week. So did any of this have an effect or an impact on the elections, particularly since the candidates themselves had not really discussed this?
Well, on May 30th, YouGov released a simulation of seat estimates based on some new data science we'd been working on that indicated that a hung parliament was likely. Now, that wasn't very widely believed at the time, although a bit more people are believing us now. What's interesting about that is that it was updated every single day after that, including through the period when the second attack took place in London. It didn't change. And so the data that we have indicates that, no, this did not have an impact on the end result.
All right, Joe, we got to go, but thanks for joining us today. Joe Twyman, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Former FBI Director James Comey admitting he helped leak memos to the media after being fired. And now congressional investigators are looking to get their hands on those memos and what they hope to uncover. Next.
Congressional investigators now demanding former FBI Director James Comey turn over memos recounting his private conversations with President Donald Trump. Lawmakers also requesting the White House produce any tapes of those talks, a prospect the president first hinted at after Comey's firing last month. Garrett Tenney joins us live now in Washington with more details. Garrett?
Well, Kelly, we've known about these memos for almost a month now. They've been reported on in the New York Times, shared with the special counsel Robert Mueller's team, and talked about extensively during Thursday's hearing. But so far, congressional investigators have not been able to get copies to look at for themselves, and they are not happy about it. Here's Republican Senator Susan Collins, who sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Writing in his private journal at home at night, he produced the memos on FBI computers, in an FBI car. He started writing one, and they are FBI documents and thus government work product. They are not his private papers.
Thanks to a question by Collins during Thursday's hearing, we learned that Como shared at least one of those memos with a friend, law professor Dan Richmond, in order for it to be leaked to a reporter, and that he may still have a copy of that memo. The heads of the Senate Judiciary Committee have now reached out to Richmond to request copies of all the memos that he has. And in a statement, the committee also laid out its own frustration, saying in part, the senators had previously requested copies of the memos from the FBI and from Comey directly. Comey refused to cooperate at the time, and yesterday he testified that he no longer has copies of the memos. The FBI has thus far not provided the memos to the committee, and Comey has declined an invitation to testify before the Judiciary Committee. The heads of the House Intelligence Committee have also now reached out to both James Comey for copies of his memos and to the White House counsel, Don McGahn, for any records the White House has of the meetings, including any recordings of those conversations. That is, of course, if they exist. Kelly?
All right, Garrett Tenney reporting live from Washington. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in Bill Gavin, former assistant director of the FBI in New York, and former chief executive for the FBI in New York, Miami, and Denver. Bill, thank you so much for talking to us. All right, let's talk about this case, because now that the president has hired his own personal attorney, something that you don't often see in the White House, it just brings it to a whole new level. And you know his lawyers are sitting back while he's holding news conferences talking about this legal matter. And typically when you're involved in a legal case, as a client, you don't hold news conferences. What do you think is going through the mind of President Trump's attorneys?
I want to say that after yesterday's news conference, when the president, in fact, said he would 100% stand up and be sworn in and testify under oath, the noise you heard in the background was his attorneys sucking the oxygen out of the air. They were never going to let that happen if he listens to them. And that's a big if, Julie, because that hasn't been the history of what's gone on. People try to counsel him. We all voted for him for some great reasons, for immigration, for tax reform, for health care reform, for infrastructure. He needs to get to that and stop getting waylaid by the vignettes of the theater that go on in some of these hearings.
Yeah.
One thing I would say too, you got to be real careful. If you said you'd be sworn in, you better be careful nobody subpoenas you to do that, because then you're kind of in a bind too. And remember, there's only one person so far in this whole odyssey that has put their hand straight up in the air and sworn to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, and that's Jim Comey. So, you know, I have to say, he knows the consequences of lying under oath. His prosecution probably, he's not lying under oath. So it's a real difficult situation that everybody's in right now.
What are lawmakers looking to find in these memos?
I think the lawmakers are looking to find if there's any more information other than what came out in the newspapers. But I want to say that if there was additional information in these memos, they'd be there. Now, you know, I heard one of the senators say that, you know, the memos belong to the federal government because he used a federal type. If you use a federal pen and wrote it on a piece of paper, does that belong to the federal government? I think that's a little bit of nonsense. That if he doesn't have anything classified in those memos, they belong to him, and he can do whatever he wants with them. The other side of the coin is, you know, I hear the president's attorney saying they're going to bring this to the United States government. They're going to bring it to the Inspector General. Jim Comey is a civilian. He's no longer bound by anything within the federal government. They can't do anything to him in terms of the Inspector General looking at what he's done since he's been a civilian. So I just wish we could get back to normalcy and address the concerns of the country that the president was voted to do, and everybody voted for him to do it. I wish it would get back to that and we'd stop this nonsense.
I think a lot of Americans would agree with you. It's time to get back to the issues. Enough of the drama. Bill Gavin, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Julie, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Fox News alert right now, and it's grim. Fox News confirming that 3 Army Rangers were killed today in Afghanistan. That word coming from a senior U.S. military official. A 4th Ranger was wounded. Military officials are expected to issue a statement soon. There have been reports that Afghan soldiers were behind the attack, but so far that is unconfirmed. We're following the story and we'll bring you breaking developments as they unfold.
Very sad news today.
Yes.
Former FBI Director James Comey's dramatic testimony this week, sparking an outcry of reaction. But how did the media handle all the coverage? We're going to discuss fair and balanced straight ahead.